What's up, Ragin Nation? My name is Alex and you're watching the Ragin Ronin review, and in this episode I will be reviewing The Hunger Games. The Hunger Games is a movie that I got caught up in all the excitement. I don't really know anything about it before the movie, and then I just got really excited and decided to purchase an advanced midnight screening ticket, and I got a review for you. And before I start this review, I just want to remind you guys that I'm reviewing the movie. I'm not here to review the novel written by Suzanne Collins. So a lot of people might comment and say that the book is so much better than the movie. You gotta read the books. Well, like I said, I'm not here to review the book. I'm here to review the movie that I saw last weekend, and I really want to give a non-biased opinion. I also am not gonna talk about Battle Royale because I feel that reviewing this movie has nothing to do with Battle Royale. Battle Royale is another review on its own, so I'll talk about that in another video. Anyways, I'm not gonna go out of my way to read the book just because I'm a freaking idiot. I have the combined attention span of a turnip, so I can't read books. Anyways, let's talk about the story. The setting for The Hunger Games is set in a not too distant future. I would say a little bit over 100 years later, and it takes place after this great war. You have North America, or America, divided into these 12 districts. Then you have the capital. The capital is where high society lives. These are like higher class citizens. And then the districts is where all the lower class citizens live. They're blue collar workers. They live in not so nice houses, I suppose. Some people go starving. They're always hunting for food. And this nation that they live in is called Panem or Panem. I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. Every year they have something called the annual Hunger Games. And the Hunger Games is where they take one boy and one girl aged 12 to 18 from each of the 12 districts, and then they randomly select them and put them into a duel to the death. And these Hunger Games are there for two reasons, and that is for entertainment, and also it's a form of punishment and also intimidation to the district to remind them about the wars that happened in the past. So in a nutshell, that's the story of the Hunger Games. And I gotta say, I like this concept a lot. I find it's very profound and psychologically disturbing. One may think of it as, well, it's kids killing kids. This happens all the time in various parts of the world and every day. But the difference is that whenever it happens, we don't really hear about it. But this is actually a televised event for entertainment, and that in itself is very disturbing. Apparently, society thinks that when you have grown-ups or adults fighting to the death, it's not so bad. But when you put kids against each other fighting to the death, you take away the one thing that makes them kids, and that is their innocence. Some of the kids will never really even understand why they need to do this, and it's an adult situation that could be beyond the comprehension of any innocent teen. While the idea of a kid being randomly selected to partake in these Hunger Games may come as a shock, it is actually something that the people of the district have come to accept, and that is what I find even more disturbing. And also, while the story is very brutal, it deals with moral issues, like such as friendship, honor, humanity, betrayal, and necessity. It's also a social commentary on the entertainment industry and how society that we live in today views this type of entertainment as mainstream. The story of the Hunger Games is told completely through the eyes of Katniss, and I absolutely love her character. I love how her character evolves in this movie. You will see how she thinks she understands why things are happening the way they are, to how she really feels, to how she must eventually adapt for her survival. There are, of course, other supporting characters in this film, and these characters are wonderful. You have Haymitch, who is a survivor of a previous Hunger Games, and he gives Katniss advice on how to survive the games. And then you also have Cinna, who sees the courage in Katniss, and he gives advice on how Katniss can win the audience over before the games. There's also Ify Trinket, who is the MC during the reaping. And of course, during the Hunger Games, you will definitely have the tributes, which include a handful of various personalities, including the bloodthirsty murderous types. You got the ones who don't want to fight. You have the ones who want to be friends with you. You also have the ones who just want to watch everything from afar as the others kill themselves. And then of course, there's Katniss, who just wants to survive by doing whatever's necessary. And with regards to the supporting characters, I love that at the beginning, when you meet supporting characters like Haymitch and Peeta, you don't really think much of them at first, but then as the movie progresses, they start growing on you and you really start getting to like them. This is a movie with a great story and great characters, and it's exactly what you need to make a movie to become outstanding, but it isn't without flaws, and I'll explain here. First of all, the movie does not waste any time with regards to getting you up to speed on what the Hunger Games is really about. The movie is made up of 3 acts, and that is the Reaping, the Capitol, and the Hunger Games. You get the gist of the story in the first act, and it is the second act where you learn more about the characters, and it is in those 2 acts which have some of the greatest scenes, because that is where the character development happens, and it is where the build-up happens for the big Hunger Games, and that's what we've been waiting for. Unfortunately, the movie starts losing a little bit of momentum in the third act. If you're really absorbed into the film, the level of violence will actually shock you, but once it is over, it is at that point where it's just about survival, because the initial bloodbath has already occurred, and everybody's on their own except for those who choose to form alliances. And when this starts happening, the movie does start to slow down until it starts using some gimmicky plot devices to get the story moving along. Thankfully, these gimmicks do work, but I'd still have to say that the first and second act is more engaging than the third act. Also, another thing I'd like to point out is that because this movie is told completely through the eyes of Katniss, one would say that this is a more character-driven story. But I'd like to address that and say that this is more of a story-driven movie, because when you really think about it, we already know how this story is going to end. We just want to know what are the exact measures that Katniss took to get there. And that's another one of the problems of the film. The story revolves so much around Katniss's character that we don't even know what's going on with the other characters. Are they out there killing each other? Are they hunting? Have they turned on each other? Are they even alive? We don't know. All we hear is screams and suggested violence, but we don't really see it happening. We don't actually get to meet them until Katniss bumps into them in the forest. And because of that, we don't really get to learn about their character. We don't know what's going through their minds. And there really isn't any characterization for any of them. Alright, now I want to talk about the direction in the film. The film is directed by Gary Ross, and the very first thing I noticed was that he wanted a more raw and handheld feel for the look of this film, and that's very evident in the first few shots, and it might get pretty annoying, and unfortunately it set the tone for what the rest of the film is going to be like. But one thing that I did notice is that that type of handheld feel was only apparent in the first and third act of the film. The second act, which took place in the Capitol, the camera's more stable, and I'm pretty sure that Gary Ross meant to do that intentionally because the stableness of the camera represents the calm and controlled environment that is the Capitol. On the other hand, in the District and in the Hunger Games, anything can happen. But I have to say that the action is very poorly shot. Now I understand why they decided to do that, because you have a PG-13 film with an R-rated concept. But while I'm no Hollywood director, I'm pretty sure there are more practical ways to shoot action without shooting it super close and having shaky camera footage and just so many out of focus shots. And believe me when I say that there are a lot of shots that are out of focus. It's not my thing, but I do believe that there are times when it is appropriate. Examples of films which use the shaky camera technique really well were Saving Private Ryan and the Bourne Identity franchise. The Hunger Games is how not to do it. And anybody would agree with me when I say that we would have actually preferred to see the action very clearly, because that is what the build-up in the first and second act was all about. Now, on the other hand, I will still give Gary Ross points for the fact that while the action was sloppily shot, the shock value still remained. While the camera was having a seizure, the brutality is still there. So the violence is actually very suggested as opposed to it being graphic. There's nothing spectacular about it. It's very horrific and brutal, and it happens very fast. You see the results of the violence, and it is very haunting, because even though you think that they shot it during an earthquake, the fact remains is that you have these teenagers killing each other without truly understanding who they killed and why they're doing it. And that concept alone will forever haunt them, and it poses a very deep question that some of us don't want to ask because we might be afraid of the answer, and that is, what will you do in the same situation? So while the camera work does need some improvement, I do give Gary Ross points for keeping us engaged through the horror and with emotion. Another thing that I'd like to mention about Gary Ross's direction is that he decided to keep the visual effects shots to a bare minimum. I was hoping to get a sense of what the Capitol would be like on a more grand scale, but we don't really get that, and I think that Gary Ross intended for this because he wanted the audience to connect with Katniss and Peeta, and that is by showing us everything through their eyes. He wants us, the audience, to view the people of the Capitol exactly the same way that Katniss and Peeta would view them, and it is actually a very great storytelling tool, especially in the first and second act, because we learn that these people living the good life in high society actually actually need to get themselves checked on how they view humanity. It's a social commentary that the director effectively gets across to the audience very clearly. And this finally brings me to talk about the acting in the movie. This movie would not be the same without Jennifer Lawrence. This is her movie. It is all her. She owns the role of Katniss, and I think that a huge part of the success is because of her performance. And I also got to mention that Woody Harrelson, Elizabeth Banks, Stanley Tucci also gave very memorable performances. And also Willow Shields, who played the role of Primrose Everdeen, really sold me on the horror of the reaping. It is a scene that really makes your heart frozen because of how well she performs in that scene. And after all that's been said and done, overall excellent movie, outstanding performances, must see in the theater, great story, great characters, has some minor flaws, and while the camera work can be improved, keep in mind that this is not a movie about spectacular action. It's a movie about survival and doing what's necessary. 9 out of 10, highly recommended. Go check it out. I've already seen it twice and I highly recommend that you check it out. As always, if you enjoyed this review, show me some support by clicking that like button, subscribe to my YouTube channel, like me on Facebook, The Ragin Nation, and also follow me on Twitter at Ragin Nation. I got more movie reviews coming up for you, so make sure you're subscribed. And also, I got the spoiler-filled video where I compare The Hunger Games with Battle Royale, so you won't want to miss that. And also, I talk about novels versus movie adaptations in general, so stay tuned for that. My name is Alex Yu, and thanks for watching the Ragin Ronin review. I'll see you next time. Peace. Many story arcs and character arcs. And what I mean by that is that you'll notice that something happens in the movie, whether it be something that has to do with a character